Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So this is part 3 of the talk on how Islam applies to modern subjects, especially modern economics. As we have seen, conventional textbooks completely ignore the role of morality and ethics and pretend to be objective and factual. And our goal is to see through this pretense and to understand what is really going on behind the scene. The structure of modern economics is meant to deceive, it's meant to impress, it's meant to create shock and awe so that people do not question. So if we use the teachings of Islam, we can learn how to question these things. And then we can achieve real insight as to what is going on. So after we reconsider economics from the point of view of Islam, we see that everything has to be changed. Conventional economics is based on a society in which you have greed, you have competition, you have individualism, you have hedonism. Uh, Islam tries to create a society which is based on cooperation and generosity and social responsibility, taking care of each other. So the whole foundation has to be changed. The biggest obstacle in the path is that we are in awe of the West. We think that whatever they say, they must be right. So conventional economics is designed to create shock and awe. So we must not be discouraged saying, oh, this is too complicated, this is beyond us. We'll just listen to the Western experts. We cannot think on our own. In fact, we must understand this economics because today this economics is the common religion of mankind, and it drives the decisions and actions of a huge number of people today. Our policymakers and policymakers all over the world are making policies on the basis of this new religion, and nobody really understands what it is. And so it is very important for us students of economics to understand what this economics is. And in particular, one major obstacle is the mathematics. It seems like says mathematics is so complex, we all just give up and we say, oh, this is beyond my understanding. So I'll just take the word of the experts. So we have to look at what are the ideas that are hidden inside the mathematics. And there is a way to do that, as we will see. So the mathematics is actually designed to prevent us from thinking. It is used as a weapon. You can't understand it, so you can't question. There are many very big mathematicians and economists who have stated this clearly, that mathematics is being abused. People do not understand the mathematics, and people are using mathematics in places where it is not appropriate. And after the global financial crisis, lots of very sophisticated mathematicals just gave very bad results. A very simple example of misuse of mathematics is this utility maximization theory. If I say to you that, look at this old woman, she is purchasing tomatoes. Do you know what she is doing? She has this multivariate function, which is her utility function. She takes the first order partial derivatives and gets the first order conditions. She is substituting the budget constraints, and oh look, she has discovered that she should buy 3.5 pounds of potatoes. This is completely absurd. We know that this is not what we do. We all have experience in shopping. And we don't know that this is not how any human being behaves. But we are so awed and so impressed that when this theory is taught to us, we just accept it without question. Robert Solow, a Nobel laureate, made this remark about the theories of Lucas and Prescott, which are currently the dominant macroeconomic theories, that these people are like madmen, and they're making mad, crazy assumptions. And they would like to just engage in the debate on mathematics, but I don't talk to them about mathematics, because if I start discussing mathematics, it means I have accepted these crazy assumptions. So the basic thing is that when you start talking about mathematics, you've already lost the game, because inside, before you start doing the mathematics, You make some assumptions which allow you to do the mathematics. And that's where the whole ball game is. Once you make the assumptions, then the mathematics is just fancy assumption, which based on fancy assumptions. So we have to learn to see through these mathematics. So here is a.
I believe my eyes. Why have you come back?
Please, sir, we've done what you told us. We've brought you the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West. We melted her.
Oh, you liquidated her, eh? Very resourceful.
Yes, sir. So we'd like you to keep your promise. If you could bring her.
Not so fast. Not so fast. I'll have to give the matter a little thought. Go away and come back tomorrow.
Tomorrow? But I want to go home now.
You've had plenty of time already. Yeah. Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. I said come back tomorrow.
If you are really great and powerful, you keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great Oz? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh, the great Oz has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great Oz has spoken.
Who are you?
I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
Well, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard. I believe my eyes. I believe my eyes.
So this is exactly the situation with the mathematics. It looks very powerful and impressive, but hidden behind it is just a fraud. So how can we learn to see through mathematics? It's not difficult. In economics, you start with a real world problem, something which is, you can see, you're trying to produce more resources, you're trying to increase the rate of growth, you're trying to provide food for the hungry, whatever. You start with a problem, then you put it into mathematical format. This is where a mistake. And then you work out a very fancy mathematical solution, and then you say, okay, this is what we need to do. So you have a real world answer. So now you can ignore all the fancy math, because you can know for sure that it is all wrong. We know that human problems are too complicated to be solved by mathematics. Your behavior, my behavior, how society moves, forces of history, these cannot be reduced to any mathematical law. This is known in advance. Mathematics is just not powerful enough to handle this. So what we do in order to look through the math is to look at the question, which we can all understand, look at the answer in real world language, which is also understandable. Ignore all the math and look at the motivations. Why are people coming up with these answers? This usually serves the needs of power. So once we understand this, we ignore, instead of looking at the math, we look at who is being benefited from this answer. That will give us much more insight. So let me just look at a few examples. So for example, your economic theory teaches you that price equals marginal cost. But if you look at the world around you, insulin prices are around $300 in the USA and around $10 in the developing countries. So can price equal marginal cost? Epinephrine, which is another very essential drug, is 600 in the US and $1 in Pakistan. Economic theory says that firms are price takers. There is a market price and they must accept the market price. But actually, Alan Blinder did a survey and it said that most of the firms set their prices. They are price makers. There are many examples which prove that prices are not equal to marginal cost. Now we look at, instead of looking at the mathematics which proves price equals marginal cost, we ask the question, why does somebody want to show this when it's not true? Well, basically, we want the company which is charging $300 for insulin wants to say that this is really just a reflection of my cost. So it's fair, it's just, it's permissible. This is what the argument is being made, that we don't understand. What is the mathematics doing? Mathematics is justifying high prices which allow the corporations to make profits. So this is the way to understand the mathematics. Similarly, your economics teaches you that wages equal marginal product of labor. But if you look at the world around you, you can see that it is not true. All people in the government grade 19, all assistant professors, they make the same pay because that's the grade pay. But are they equally productive? Of course not. In all industries, you have different categories of workers and they all receive the same pay, even though some of the workers are very hardworking, some of them are lazy. So the marginal product is not the same. If you look at the pay of chief executives, it has over the past 30 years increased 10 times. It is now about 300 times that of the average worker. And it used to be only 30 times that. So has the productivity of the CEOs increased by tenfold? Of course not. But the argument basically is being made is that if somebody earns a lot, it is because he deserves it, because the productivity of his work justifies his pay. This is the real argument. This is what's behind the mathematics. The mathematics is all wrong, and it's quite easy to prove that it is wrong. But when we are impressed by mathematics, then we accept a argument that the amount of money people make is justified by their productivity. And so millionaires and billionaires, they all have money because they deserve it. So this is completely wrong. In fact, we can also look at the labor productivity of the workers, which has increased a huge amount over the 30 years, but their wages have not increased. So even they are not getting a fair share. All of the extra productivity is going to the capitalists. So this is an example of how power allows you to get more money, but this fact is hidden by the mathematics, which doesn't make any mention of power. Similarly, one of the central theories of economics is that price is determined by supply and demand. But there is a lot of empirical evidence which shows that this is not true. Card and Kruger did a study which showed that if you increase the minimum wage, this leads to increased employment, contradicting SND, the supply and demand theory. Similarly, there is a lot of data which shows that the theory of supply and demand does not work in the labor market. In fact, Keynes in general theory said exactly this. How can you have long-term unemployment if supply and demand works? You can't, because if you have long-term unemployment, then the wages will go down and the demand for labor will increase, supply will decrease, and ultimately the unemployment will finish. But many arguments by Keynes showed that this does not happen. So anyway, all the complicated supply and demand mathematics is wrong. The real mechanics of how supply and how wages are determined and how prices are determined is very different from what economic theory says. So how can Islam help us launch a revolution in economics? Well, first we must master the conventional economics in order to show that it is wrong. But the mastering does not involve mastering the mathematics. It involves mastering what is being said, the concepts. Basically, I tell my students that learning to drive a car is very easy relative to learning how the engine is built. So today, the economic theories that you are learning try to teach you how the engine is built, but they never teach you how to drive. So what we need to do is to learn how to drive, how these theories are used in the real world. Once you start understanding how economic theory is used in the real world to justify the wealth of the rich and to justify the exploitation of the poor and to justify inequality, injustice, oppression, power, then we can construct a real alternative based on Islamic ideas. And this will lead, Islamic ideas are that there should be justice, there should be social responsibility, everyone should get to eat even if they don't have the money to pay for it, everyone should get their basic needs taken care of, we should educate every child in our society regardless of whether his parents are rich or poor, and so on. So if we start building an economic theory from Islamic sources, this will lead to a complete revolution in all of the fields, micro, macro, statistics, mathematics, econometrics. So today we are content to be third-rate followers of the West. Instead, we can become the leaders of the world, just like the early Muslims became leaders of the world when they understood Islam and accepted it and applied it in their lives and used it to create a revolution inside their own personal lives and then a revolution in the external world around them.